A VH1 dating reality show in 2014, Cisco Rosita was blindsided by his then-girlfriend, Diamond Strawberry, with the news that she was the mother of a young girl. And to this unexpected news, Cisco looked into his girlfriend's eyes and then said, "You're canceled." Now, a couple of things here. First, Diamond Strawberry has to be one of the greatest names in the history of television. I mean, Mr. and Mrs. Strawberry could have gone with Lisa or Susan or Malia, but they went with Diamond, pretty much guaranteeing her the opportunity to be on a reality show someday. But the second thing is this: I don't know if Cisco came up with the line, "You're canceled," on his own, or if it was written into the script. Now, you know reality shows are somewhat scripted, right? But either way, people loved it. Initially, this started showing up on social posts as a joke or as a lighthearted way to express disapproval. But some 8 years later, we realized that being canceled is no joke. That the cost of being canceled today is extremely high. In fact, it is the knockout punch to a career, a relationship, a reputation. And if you believe that you can bounce back quickly from being canceled in our current cancel culture, think again. Today, people they're not likely to give a second chance, if at all. You're canceled. It may be fairly new to our modern pop culture dictionary, but canceling people for a moment of failure or for expressing some unpopular view, it's been going on for a long, long time. In fact, I want to take you back about 2,000 years. At the time, there was a carpenter turned teacher who had become a major source of irritation to the Jewish religious authorities because he had the nerve to suggest that they had lost their way spiritually. He also had this tendency to hang out with undesirable type of people. And not only that, but he also claimed that he and God were one and the same. That sounded absolutely ridiculous, but there are a lot of people who were buying into this claim because he had this tendency to just keep doing godlike things. He would cast out demons, and he'd tell the weather to calm down, and he would give sight to blind people, and he even told a dead guy to go ahead and come back out of a tomb on one occasion. And so the religious leaders realized that, you know what, we're going to be in real trouble if this guy keeps this up, and so it's time that he's canceled. And knowing they couldn't cancel him on their own, they turned to their oppressors, the Roman authorities, for permission and help. Now, the Roman authorities, they didn't give a rip about this guy, but they saw that it was important to these Jewish religious leaders. Not that they cared about the Jews either, but what they did care about was keeping calm in the city of Jerusalem. And since emotions were running at a fever pitch at that particular time, Pilate, who was the Roman governor of Judea, he gave the Jews what they desired. And so that person who had become a major irritation to the Jewish religious authorities, well, for the next several hours, he was humiliated in the worst possible way. He was called names, and he was mocked. He was spit on, he was struck, and he was whipped. A historical writer by the name of Mark shares the humiliation on that day in these words. He says this: "The soldiers led Jesus away into the palace, that is the praetorium, and called together the whole company of soldiers. They put a purple robe on him, then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on him. And they began to call out to him, 'Hail, King of the Jews!' Again and again they struck him on the head with a staff and spit on him. Falling on their knees, they paid homage to him. When they had mocked him, they took off the purple robe and put on his own clothes on him. And then they led him out to crucify him. The Roman soldiers took him to a place called the Mount of Calvary. He was promptly stripped naked and hung on a cross. For the next several hours, he experienced pure humiliation and unbelievable suffering, both emotional and physical, until his breath was no more. We read these words in Mark chapter 15, verse 37. With a loud cry, Jesus breathed his last. And in that moment when it all came to an end, Jesus' enemies and his followers left with very different feelings. There were those who left absolutely rejoicing, saying it's over, and there were those who left grieving in the worst possible way. But they all left believing the exact same thing. Jesus had been canceled. Over, done, never to be heard from again. But here's the thing about Jesus. You can't cancel him. Now, you can decide to pretend he doesn't exist. You can ignore him like you would a person that you blocked on your social media account. You can tell him to get out of your business, but you cannot cancel him. You just can't. And Jesus proved this 3 days later when he walked out of the tomb where his dead body was placed. That's nonsense. You don't come back from being dead for 3 days. I know. I get it. I wouldn't believe it either if it were not for the fact that so many people saw Jesus walking around in a brand new resurrected body. And they not only saw him from a distance, but there were so many people who sat down and had a conversation with him. And they didn't even have a conversation with him. Some people sat down and they enjoyed a meal with him. And so we also read these historical words that come from 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verse 5 through 8. He, Jesus, appeared to Cephas and then to the 12. And after that, he appeared to more than 500 of the brothers and sisters at the same time, most of whom are still living, though some have fallen asleep. And then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles, and last of all, he appeared to me also as to one abnormally born. Paul says, listen, some of you may not believe this, but I'm telling you, Jesus did resurrect and come back from the dead. And if you don't want to take it from me, take it from all these people who saw him and walked with him and had conversations with him, because so many of these people are still alive today. And so check it out for yourself. For centuries, people have attempted to cancel Jesus. For centuries to come, people will still attempt to cancel Jesus. But this is absolutely silly. It's silly because no one can keep Jesus from doing the work that he's doing. You say, what type of work is that? Well, here's the work that he is doing. He is holding together and he is ruling over this entire great universe. But that's not the only type of work that he does. He's also continually pursuing people. Now, what type of people? Believe it or not, he is pursuing the type of people who legitimately deserve to be canceled. You see this on full display when he interacts with one of his very close friends, a man by the name of Peter. Just hours before Jesus was arrested, this particular friend of his made this statement, "Hey, Jesus, I'll be with you, I'll walk with you, I'll have your back to the very end, even if it means my own death." But then, later that night, this same guy who had made that bold statement denied even knowing Jesus, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And the third time he denied Jesus, he added in some colorful, make your mama blush language, just so everyone around him would know that, hey, me and this guy Jesus, we're not bros in any shape or form. Don't know the guy. At the very least, you would expect Jesus to unsubscribe to Peter's social media account for that move, wouldn't you? I mean, I certainly would. Followed by a tweet declaring that Peter and I would no longer be hanging out together because I view him as an unsafe person. And we'd just get that out of the way. But not Jesus. Not Jesus. Rather than shame or shun Peter, he went after him. And he eventually caught Peter on the Sea of Galilee beach, where he invited Peter and his fellow disciples to sit down and have a meal with him. And in that particular moment, as the fire was blazing and the fish was cooking, and there was chit-chat, I can only imagine that Peter, reflecting upon what he had done, felt tremendous shame and regret and embarrassment. Have you ever been there? Have you ever been crushed by the weight of your failure? Not able to look to the future because your mind is so caught up in replaying those moments of failure from your past? Have you ever been in that moment when you're absolutely certain that God has certainly canceled you just like everybody seemingly else has? If you ever have felt that way, I want to assure you this morning that is the furthest thing from the truth. And I say that with confidence this morning because I look at the way that Jesus responded to this man, Peter. Instead of allowing Peter to just suffer in his shame, Jesus asked him a question to launch him into an exciting future. And this is the question that Jesus asked him. Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? There's some varying opinion as to what Jesus was referring to when he said, do you love me more than these? There are those who believe that Jesus was referring to the nets and the boats that belonged to Peter. There are others who hold the opinion that Jesus was referring to Simon or Peter's fellow disciples. I would suggest he was referring to both. That the question Jesus was asking Peter in that moment is, Peter, hey, listen, do you love me more than your work? Do you love me more than your relationships? Do you love me more than anything else that's going on in your life? It's a great question for us this morning, isn't it? Do you love Jesus more than anything else in your life? More than your work, more than your hobbies, more than your relationships, more than your family, more than anything else? And Jesus didn't ask Peter this question one time or two times. He asked him this question 3 times. It was almost as if he didn't believe Peter when Peter said, I do love you. And this stung Peter. It stung him. We read this in John chapter 21 and verse 17. Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the 3rd time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Peter was right. Jesus did know. Jesus knew that Peter, despite his colossal failure, knew that he loved him from the depths of his being. And so why ask him this question 3 times? Well, could it be that Jesus was trying to help Peter put his past to rest? Was he trying to help Peter get out from under the shame that was holding him down? I think so. I think in this moment, Jesus was helping Peter begin to build a new memory, replacing a memory of fear and failure and creating a new memory of conviction and commitment by allowing him to affirm his love for Jesus, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And each time Peter said, I do love you, Jesus responded by giving him a job to do. And each time it was phrased a little bit differently, but essentially here was the job. Here you go, Peter. If you love me, here's what I want you to do. I want you to feed and take care of my sheep. And in giving Peter that particular job, Jesus was making known to everybody around him, hey, I haven't written Peter off. He still has a purpose in my kingdom. He still has a plan in my work. He's still of value to me. Others, they may have written him off, but not me. He still has a place in relationship with me. And this is who Jesus is. He is the God who runs after us when everybody runs away from us. He is the God who gives us an opportunity to write a better ending to our broken story. He is the God who hangs on a cross to take away our shame. He is the God of second chances. This is our God. And today I want to invite you to accept that second chance. Stop asking if you deserve it. You don't. Stop trying to earn it. You can't. Just embrace it. Embrace the truth that despite the fact you can be a jerk and let others down, that you failed morally, that you've messed up your kids, that you've dropped the ball at work, that you've caused heartache, that Jesus Christ still loves you and He still has a purpose for your life. He doesn't give up on you. Is this just an invitation to keep being and doing cruddy things? No, it is not. But until you embrace God's perfect love for you, despite your imperfect state, you'll continue to live in the shadows of shame and being of little use to this world. To get out of the shame, we have to eventually come to embrace this truth that God loves us with an everlasting love, even on our worst possible moments. I love the way that Tim Keller puts this. He writes this: "We are more sinful and flawed in ourselves than we ever dared believe. Yet at the very same time, we are more loved and accepted in Jesus Christ than we ever dared hope." Not only do I want to invite you to accept this second chance, but I want to plead with you to be a person of second chances. Either you saw it live or you've seen the video clip by this point of that moment at the Academy Awards with Will Smith and Chris Rock. Was it real? And who's to blame? Were the two questions that we wrestled with initially. Because if it was real, we needed to know who to cancel, right? But there was a third question that I found myself wrestling with fairly quickly. And the question was simply this: Why did Denzel Washington quickly go to support Will Smith? It didn't add up to me. I found myself thinking, Denzel, Chris Rock's the one who just got slapped silly. Why don't you go to support him first? Now, initially, he did have a conversation or a word with Chris Rock, but his support first went to Will Smith. Now, maybe I'm overthinking this, but here's the conclusion that I've come to. That being a follower of Jesus Christ, Denzel Washington made the decision that I'm going to go to the guy that everybody else is soon going to be running away from. Now, whether he had that thought in his mind in that particular moment or not, I don't know, but that is the stance that he has taken in the aftermath, in the public fallout that Will Smith has experienced. I want you to listen to the words that he shared with T.D. Jakes in an interview about that particular incident. Denzel said this: "Fortunately, there were people there, not just me, but others. Tyler Perry came immediately right over there with me, said some prayers. I don't want to say what we talked about, but for the grace of God, go any of us. Who are we to condemn? I don't know all the ins and outs of the situation, but I know the only solution was prayer the way I see it. In no way am I suggesting there shouldn't be consequences for poor behavior. Will Smith deserves to be punished in some way for that incident. He has work to do to make things right. What I am saying is this: in a world that loves to kick the crud out of people in their worst moments of failure, those moments that are so humiliating, the gospel of Jesus Christ calls us as a people to help lift people back to their feet with the love and grace of Jesus Christ. I imagine there are some people that you know personally, people at work, people in your family, people at school, perhaps people in this church who have been canceled in some way. What they need more than anything else this Easter is for you to look them in the eyes and say something like this: despite everything that's happened, Jesus still loves you, and so do I. And if you're here this morning and you need to hear those words, then please hear me say them. Despite everything that's happened, despite everything that you might have done in your life to cause hurt to other people, Jesus still loves you. I still love you. And I'd love to get with you for a cup of coffee to talk about how to move forward into a better future. Please let me know if we can have that conversation, because there is still another chapter to be written. And really, that's kind of the last point, that whatever you do, make the most of this second chance. You see, 50 or so days after this particular incident with Jesus, Peter went on to preach a sermon. And it was such a powerful sermon that in that particular moment, this history-changing global movement known as the church was birthed. Now, is that to say that Peter was perfect from that moment forward? Not at all. He made some horrible mistakes, really ugly sins. But despite the things that he did, he absolutely refused to allow his failures to keep him sidelined from following Jesus, pursuing a relationship with Jesus, and being about the work that Jesus Christ had given him to do. Some of you have been sidelined for way too long by your failure. Today is the day that it's time for you to start writing a new chapter. And what might that chapter sound like or look like? Well, believe it or not, oftentimes this new chapter begins with you telling the truth about your worst failure. And I know that can be scary. It's scary for all of us, but oftentimes it is when we tell the truth about our failures that it helps someone else get to their particular failure. And so I want to leave you this morning with these words from an author by the name of Mike Foster from one of my very favorite books entitled People of the Second Chances. Mike writes this: I'm proposing a movement where we say the things that others deem shameful and worthless. I believe grace has a voice, and that voice is ours. It comes in the forms of things we're not supposed to say. The imperfectionist movement begins with individuals being courageous with their words and stories, feeling safe to speak the unspeakable things. What the enemy meant to be a curse can now flow out of our mouths as a blessing. You and I become heroes with our words when we fearlessly speak the truth of who we are, what we've done, and who we are becoming. Listen to that again. You and I become heroes with our words when we fearlessly speak the truth of who we are, what we've done, and who we are becoming. We should never be ashamed of how our story fits. We should never hide the words, characters, scenes, and cliffhangers that make up our stories of grace. We rob each other of sacred friendship when we delete moments, erase characters, or censor the scandalous parts. But when we share them honestly, we help others breathe easier about whatever stories they have inside. I think this is success in life. These are holy moments. I pray that God will give us the courage to step into the lives of people and share some holy moments this very week.